I figured I'd make a video. Um, it's midnight. It's about midnight here in New York, and I figured I'd make have a talking video. This will be my instead of the Wolf of Wall Street, I'll be the Lamb of Wall Street. Like the film, the film was kind of interesting when I saw that film because it seemed to resonate me with. It reminded me of my high school education. Not on the scene. I'm just, but just the idea of that, like wealthiness, and greed, and debauchery, and all that type of stuff will prevail is an idea of good success. Like I watched it, and he said his idea. He said he solved problems by becoming rich. But those of you who had the cross, being a Christian, it's just pretty much the opposite. It was just a play on like the opposite of the way people should act. Anyways, I don't know. I brought this film up. I brought that up because my brother said that he enjoyed the film, and I recently was having a type of argument with some folks about ideas of well, it was an argument with the world really, because most people in the world believe that success, by definition, means to I guess be wealthy, to earn a great living, and by great living it means great finances, to be financially secure. But it reminds me of an old king, supposed to be the richest king who ever lived. He had the most gold, most cattle, most silver than any other king that's ever lived. And he, being the richest king, was made miserable by riches, he said. He said all of it was a vanity and a vexation spirit. So it was pretty much all what you would call self-involved and lack of a better word, selfish, I guess. He did it all, that everything is just selfish and self-centered, and he found that what every person does is self-centered at every action they do. But it's to be expected. But yeah, and he said, an old saying says by that particular king said that with more wisdom and with more sorrow, and whoever increases knowledge increaseth in sadness or in misery. But that's what he wanted. He's the king that God came to him and asked him, "You're the king. What would you like with your life?" And he said, "I wanted to be wise. I wanted the ability to discern both time and judgment, right and wrong, and judge the land uprightly." And God said, according to the legend, "Because you've asked for wisdom and not material possessions and or victory over your enemy, I will give you what you asked for, and everything in the world is yours." But it turned out he didn't want anything in the world anyways. If you read about him, I mean, he ended up, if his sayings and his prose, his proverbs, say are against being wealthy. A lot of his, like for instance, I'm not particularly against. He said being blessed. I mean, he's not against being blessed. He's just against the idea of aspirations of great wealth. Like for instance, so he has a quote that says, he says, "Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the desire." So he's just said, just be happy with what you got, then just worry about having a big dream. Like for instance, like I remember when I was young, I was brought up in a public school, and they used to plague you with the question, "What are you going to be when you grow up? What are you going to be when you grow up?" And then my parents would ask me, "What are you going to do with your life?" You know. But now, after hearing that quote and that verse, you don't have to worry about it. It doesn't have to be a concern at all for you whatsoever. Oh yeah, and Christ reinforced that statement. Christ said, um, "Take no thought for the morrow, for the morrow shall think of itself." He said, "Sufficient for the day is the evil thereof." So he was completely against aspirations for the future. he was against it. So you don't have to worry. He says the day of it has its enough trouble, enough misery, and it's the day is itself. You don't have to worry about what you're going to be when you're 35 or 15. But anyways, in regard to wealth, oh yeah, I already pointed out that he said it just made him more miserable. But he was a king that, oh yeah, I skipped the fact that he had more wives than any other man who ever lived. He had thousands of wives. Oh no, he had, no, 1,000. He had 700 wives and 300 um, princesses, and I think another 300, what it was called, concubines, which means that basically it was like his wife's assistant. It's like a wife on the side that's assistant to his wife, but that's also kind of his wife. It's an interesting term, concubine. Although, oh yeah, back to wealth. Being very poor, it's kind of, I always wonder and think, well, what would life be like? Like if you win the lottery or you're son of the president. Like the president of the United States was very wealthy. He was ever successful, quote unquote successful. That's interesting once you read these verses, what success actually means. If to expire and to covet. Like, yeah, thou shalt not covet is written there. But it's interesting, the verse thou shalt not covet, because it kind of would cancel out almost everything about the day. Yeah. And that's what that means. Basically means to want something that's not your own. I shall not covet. Yeah. So, but it's for your own benefit. He wrote those verses. I mean, because it's a beneficial. Like if I never wanted anything that's not mine, then I would just be sufficient with what I have. And if I'm sufficient with what I have, I'm in a perfect state. If in a perfect state, you have nothing to worry about. No anxiety or depression. There's nothing to be depressed about. You can just be happy with what you have. People will worry about depression. Yeah, most depression. Back to thou shalt not covet. It's about thou shalt not covet, and what people call depression is kind of interesting, because a lot of what people call depression, you ask you why you're depressed. They say I'm worried about my job not earning enough money, or I'm worried about so on and so forth. But back to what thou shalt not covet. There's no depression if you don't covet, I believe. But there's different aspects of depression. Like for instance, what's called. My doctor said to me once in a visit, he said, "Have you ever heard of seasonal affective disorder?" I was like, "No." I was 15 at the time, and he said that in places like Seattle, it rains majority of the year. So he said that people were complaining that they were depressed, and the doctors found out that it was because it would rain most of the year, and since they wouldn't see the sun, most people would be depressed. And he said a lot of people even commit suicide because they're so depressed in that area of the world because they wouldn't see the sun. Which is sad, but not really relevant to me. I'm always usually adaptive to the weather. It's not a big problem. But I digress. It's going on 10 minutes. So yeah, nothing to worry about in monetary system. But I'll be back to I already brought up the president, and he receives a lot of condemnation, just like the last two. I think Bush had it the worst, in my opinion, and during my lifetime. I don't know about previous presidents, but like he got so much grievance. People were so cruel to him and said so awful things about him. They wanted to. I just remember for his almost the last 4 years of his presidency, majority of the people were just putting him down. And there's an old saying in the good book, one of the books of Moses. It says, "Curse not the ruler of your land, lest you bring shame upon thy people." I believe that's how it's written. But I agree with that. So I try never to say anything bad about. I try not to. I try not to say anything bad about the rulers of the land. Because I know they're really tough on Bush, and I think President Trump's getting it pretty bad too. From what I see, especially on Twitter, people tweet badly about him. But curse not the ruler of your land. So you bring no shame upon thy people. Which I believe. I find that to be true. Because if no one puts down the president, the whole nation can agree. Maybe it'll be more peaceful. I agree with most of the commandments in Leviticus, but being a Christian, here's my cross. According to Christ said that when John ended the Old Testament, he said that all the law and the prophets, the old prophets before Christ, went up to John the Baptist. Because I asked him, because I believe the Old Testament ends. One of the last verses in the Old Testament says, "Behold, I will send you Elijah, and he shall comfort thee and prepare thee for the great and terrible day of the Lord. He shall return." He said, "The hearts of the sons shall return to their fathers, and the hearts of the fathers shall return to the sons." If I can quote correctly. But Christ said that when John the Baptist came, he was Elijah. And they said to him, "Behold, Elijah did come to you. It was John." And they did to him whatever they wanted. They decapitated him, killed him, because he disagreed with King Herod's new marriage. According to the legend, King Herod, which all can be proven too. I had an argument with a neighbor the other day about, he's an old friend. I've known him for years, but he's an atheist. So according to the Bible, I shouldn't speak to him at all, or not speak to him. But no, he said, "Love your neighbor." Although St. John wrote that if someone isn't a believer, follow the cross, Christ. If someone isn't a believer and doesn't bring the doctrine of Christ with them, don't accept them into your house. That's what John wrote. John wrote that you shouldn't even allow people even in your house if they're not Christian or follow Christ, because he says that don't even bid them Godspeed, which means to wish them well and good luck, or quote unquote good luck, because he says if you do bid them Godspeed, you're just as guilty as them in what they do, which is just the same from the New Testament. But anyways, back to the atheist argument. He says that there's no proof that anyone from the Bible actually ever even existed. Like for instance, I know, being an avid coin collector, there's coins called widow's mites. They're from about 100 or so BC. And because there's a Bible verse in, I believe it's the book of Mark, that says a widow, there's everyone giving mass amounts of their possessions to the temple. And they were all saying to this poor little widow, "Why don't you give more? That's all you can give is this one little mite." Or mites were just little pieces of money, like a penny, what you would call today a penny. It's like, all you can give is that mite. But Jesus interrupted and said, he's like, "How dare you? She's given more than any of you, because all of you give what you have to spare." He says, "You give a little bit out of all your great possessions. But she gave this one mite. That's all she had, being a widow. She gave more than all of you." And there's a coin you can buy. You can either get them on Amazon or on eBay, and you can find them at most coin shops. I think they're called widow's mites. They're from about 100 BC. They run about $60. And it's an old widow's mite coin. You can get them graded too at the NGC grades the coins. I think for $50 they'll grade it for you, and you send them the coin, and they send it back in a nice, shiny, illuminated plastic container that I always thought was nice if you're a coin collector. But they're called widow's mites. And there's also coins. There's denarius from the time of Christ, which, like, he says he doesn't even believe that he even walked the earth. That he says there's no proof that Jesus Christ, actually even walked the earth. But there's proof that Caesar Augustus existed. There's proof that King Herod. There's proof because of the coins. There's coins that have King Herod's inscription on them from 35 AD. So, I mean, it's not good to argue. You shouldn't mince words, but with people, but there is proof that he walked the earth. I mean, just go to Israel. If you go to Israel, you know, of course, there's proof. There's the whole land is dedicated to, especially Nazareth, is dedicated to what he did in his life. And so I believe there is legitimate proof, but some angry atheist scientists would argue and say, no, there's no proof he existed. There's no proof there's a God. Pardon me. And there's no proof of what you say is right. I want to let it get you down. But I always find it, I thought it would be enlightening for me. It's just showing them a widow's mite. Just be like, you get it graded from 100 BC, a widow's mite. That was mentioned in the book of Mark. So there you go. Proof that Jesus existed. But people might argue the widow's mite isn't sufficient. But I believe there is record of his crucifixion from a Roman bookkeeper, or the man who kept record of all the crucifixions during the time of men who were crucified, did keep record that he was. I haven't been there to see it. And plus, it just, how can you not believe that he existed? I mean, just go see. If you go to any museum, like I went to this beautiful museum in New York City. Oh, no, I'm sorry, pardon me. Washington, D.C. Went to this beautiful museum in Washington, D.C. Had all these, like, Leonardo da Vinci style, like his Last Supper style paintings. It's so mad, like hundreds of those old religious paintings. Like, reminded me of the Sistine Chapel. Like, if he did ever existed, why would people go through? So many people